In Evergreen Village, silence has always hidden more than words. But when a secret letter is finally discovered, one name returns to haunt them all: Derik. Who was he? Why was his memory buried? And why does his shadow still linger in every corner of Evergreen? Tonight, the past will no longer stay quiet, and the truth may change everything. Evergreen Village woke slowly, as if the walls were stretching after a long night. The hallways were quiet, the old clocks ticked in steady rhythm, like soft heartbeats in the silence. Outside, the ground was wet from last night's rain. The smell of damp earth floated through the windows, fresh and heavy with memory. Behind every door, lives waited, some filled with old stories, others just tired from the weight of years. Maggie woke before the sun, not because she wanted to, but because sleep rarely stayed with her. Memories woke her instead, memories that refused to rest. On the small table sat the blue diary, its cover worn and tired. It was half open, like it was waiting for her. Maggie ran her fingers across the leather. For a moment, it felt alive, like it was breathing along with her. Lily, her granddaughter, had brought new energy into Evergreen. She was young, curious, full of questions. But even youth feels the weight of secrets. Since reading the hidden letter, one name had followed her like a shadow: Derik. She didn't speak it out loud, but she felt it everywhere, in the hallways, in the garden, even in her grandmother's eyes. The name refused to disappear. That morning, Rosa was in the garden, clipping flowers. She worked carefully, the way she always did, as if every flower carried meaning. Flowers had always been her safe way of speaking, her way of saying what words could not. But even strong hands tremble when an old name rises from the past. Rosa kept her face calm, but inside, her heart cracked like glass that had been broken and glued too many times. Edward sat on the porch with his notebook. He began to sketch the roof of the gazebo, then the benches, then the long paths that wound through Evergreen. His lines were strong but careful. He always said a house was like a memory, it stayed standing only if someone cared for it. Left alone, even stone will break. He sighed deeply, knowing some foundations, like people's hearts, could break in silence. James walked slowly through the halls. His body was weaker now, but it still remembered discipline. His face, however, told the truth: there are battles no man wins. Sometimes his eyes cleared, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Other times, he sank into shadows, whispering one word: Eleanor. Not loud, not angry. More like a prayer. He wasn't asking her to return. He was asking her to forgive. That afternoon, the piano room filled with light. Arthur sat at the piano, his hands moving gently across the keys. His music seemed to breathe through the air, soft and steady. He looked at Maggie and gave a small nod, inviting her forward. She opened a small book of poems. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were unsure. Each word she read seemed to float on top of Arthur's music, like feathers drifting on air. In the back, James sat stiff, listening, nodding slightly, as if the words touched memories only he could see. When the poem ended, the room was silent. No one clapped. The silence was not empty, it was sacred. And then, suddenly, James's body froze. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood. His voice cut through the silence like lightning in the night. Eleanor. The name struck the room like thunder. Rosa rushed to him, her arms strong, her voice soft. Arthur's hands dropped from the keys, leaving the silence even heavier. Maggie lowered her eyes to the floor, not from shame, but to keep herself from breaking with him. That night, Evergreen felt smaller, like its walls had moved closer. Maggie sat at her table, the diary glowing in the lamp's light. Fear filled her chest, fear of the things she still didn't know, and fear of the things she already knew too well. The tablet buzzed, it was Lily. Her young face filled the screen, bright, alive, but her eyes were serious. She noticed the diary. "Grandma," she asked softly, "what's inside that book?" Maggie hesitated. She gave only a half answer, enough to keep Lily calm but not enough to free herself. The truth stayed locked inside. After midnight, Rosa walked the halls barefoot. The floor creaked under her weight. She entered Maggie's room quietly, letting the moonlight spill across the diary. She reached out, her fingers brushing the leather cover. Her breath caught. For a moment, it seemed she would open it. But she couldn't. Not yet. Some secrets are heavier than courage. She whispered, not yet, and slipped away into the dark. The next morning, Lily entered Maggie's room. She saw the diary on the table, waiting. Without fear, she opened it. The smell of old paper rose into the air, carrying years of hidden stories. Then, from between the pages, a folded letter slipped out and landed softly on the floor. Lily bent down, picked it up, and opened it quickly. The handwriting was careful, the ink still sharp, as if written yesterday. The words read, "To the one I could never forget." And at the end, one name. Derik. Lily's breath caught. Her heart raced. She looked around the empty room as if someone could explain. But she was alone. And from that moment on, everything in Evergreen changed. The name was no longer hidden. It was alive again. In the days that followed, silence grew heavier in Evergreen. Lily looked at her grandmother differently, full of questions. Maggie felt her silence pressing harder, harder than ever. Rosa avoided the name altogether. Edward began sketching people in his notebook again for the first time in years. And James wandered between light and shadow, sometimes whispering Eleanor's name, sometimes lost in silence. One afternoon in the garden, Maggie sat with Rosa. Lily found something, she said quietly. Rosa froze, her scissors trembling. What kind of something? She asked, her voice tight. Maggie's answer was sharp and clear, a letter. It mentioned Derik. Rosa's face went pale. She looked away. Some names belong to the past, she whispered. They don't survive well in the light of the present. But the present was already awake. That night, Maggie sat in front of the diary again. Rosa and Edward entered her room quietly. Edward spoke first. "It's time," he said softly. Rosa sat across from Lily, her hands trembling. She finally spoke. Derik was not just a man. He was part of all of their lives. He had fought beside James. He had loved Eleanor. He had once loved Maggie. And he had left scars that never healed. Edward admitted he had kept truths hidden, protecting some, hurting others. Rosa confessed she had hidden letters, afraid of what they would do. And then James appeared at the door, his eyes suddenly clear. His voice, though weak, carried truth. Eleanor was light. Derik was shadow. And together, they shaped the man I was. The room grew heavy, but also lighter. The truth was finally spoken. And they no longer carried it alone. That night, Evergreen felt different. The walls seemed to breathe softer, the silence no longer a weight but a pause, a space to rest. Secrets had been spoken. Pain was still there, yes, but it was no longer carried alone. Maggie closed the blue diary gently, as if laying down a burden she had carried for too long. Lily's young hand held hers, bridging past and future. Rosa, Edward, and James each sat with their own wounds, but now, they were wounds seen, not hidden. In Evergreen, the truth had finally found a home. And though scars remained, they were no longer marks of shame. They were signs of love, loss, and survival. The story was not finished. Some pages were still waiting. But for the first time, Evergreen was ready to turn them, together.